how to determine if a number is prime or not programmatically. What is a prime number? One may ask. A prime number is any number that is divisible by 1 and itself. Some prime numbers include 2, 3, 5, 7, 11, and so forth. So how we would write this program is we would write a function. I'm going to call it check prime, and we pass in a parameter n, and I'm using a arrow function as per the latest JavaScript syntax, and I would have some validations at the beginning. Validations are pieces of code that addresses some exceptions in your logic, and in this case the exceptions are two. One for the negative numbers 0 and 1, that's the first exception. It would address those issues. The next exception would be for number 2. Number 2 is the only even prime number. All other even numbers are not prime. So we will address that exception right away. So let's do that. If n is less than or equal to 0, or if n equals 1, we would say return false. That is going to say no, that those numbers are not prime. Otherwise, else if n equals to 2, and notice I'm using triple equals, that ensures both the value and type of a given data are the same. So if n equals 2, we will return true. That's indicating yes, 2 in fact is a prime. Alternatively, if a number is not a negative number 0, 1, or 2, we are going to use our final logic, which is a for loop. So we would start saying if variable I equals to 2, or variable I equals to 2, I less than n, I increment, I'm going to have an if condition. If n modulus I equals to 0, that is, the modulo sign is basically a remainder. So if n modulus I yields to 0, so basically if a number is divided and it yields a remainder of 0, that number is not a prime. So as per that logic, we return false. Such a number would not be a prime number. Otherwise, if it's not the case that the number divided by n divided by I doesn't yield a remainder of 0, then in fact that number is prime. That's basically saying, okay, if it doesn't have a remainder of 0, then in fact that number is not prime, and therefore then in fact that number is not even, and therefore it is prime. So we return true outside of the loop, that is. Okay, so to output our logic, that is to output the Boolean value true or false, that is whether a number is a prime or not, we will go ahead and console some statements with a couple of numbers. So I'm going to do console.log check prime 9, and let me copy this statement a couple of times to test more numbers. 9, let's do -3, 5, and 10. Okay, I'm going to save these and let's run the code. So as expected, we get an output of false, false, true, false respectively for the numbers 9. 9 isn't prime. -3 isn't a prime again. 5 is a prime, true. 10 is not a prime. So let's walk through these numbers to see how this logic is being executed in real time. So if a user enters 9 as a number to see if it's prime, the first logic and the second one would not be executed. These two statements, if statement here and the else if here, because the number 9 is neither a negative number, 0, 1, or 2. So for that reason, it would go to the final statement, that is the for loop. So it checks as soon as it goes into the loop, this condition is I less than n. Since I is starting out with 2 and n is 9, yes, that is true. I is less than n. So I would be incremented to 3 now. So n modulus I, so that is 9 modulus I equals to 0. Yes, it does. So it would return false, and it would come out of the function. Next number is -3. -3, it would go into the first statement, that is the first if condition. So because -3 is a negative number, it would immediately return false. That was easy. 5. So 5, it would go into the last statement, that is a for loop. Because 5 is not a minus, 0, or 1, or 2, it would go into the for statement. So here, I is in fact less than n. I is 2 and n is 5. So yeah, 2 is less than 5. So it would go in the if condition, that is 5 modulus 2 equals to 0. It does not. So it returns true, that 5 is a prime. Finally, 10. Again, it wouldn't go in the first two statements, which are the if statement and else if statements, because that's not what 5 is. It's not 0 minus, or it's not minus number or a 0 or 1 or 2. So 10 is, so 2 is less than 10. So our code would go into the if statement, that is 10 modulus 2, 10 modulus 3, because I would be incremented here. So 10 modulus 3 equals 0. It does not. Oops, sorry. 10 modulus 2 does equal 0. So it would return false. So I hope this makes sense. Should you have any questions or comments, feel free to comment below and like and subscribe if I was relevant and helpful. Thank you.